You're watching 10 Tampa Bay as we bring you the results of Florida's 2024 primary election.
As we come to you live across our digital platforms, polls just closed for most of the states.
And tonight we will have a breakdown of results, expert analysis, and a look ahead to what you can expect in November. I'm Frank Wiley alongside Dave Wagner and Courtney Robinson.
Right now, we're watching some big races, including both the Republican and Democratic primaries for U.S. Senate, several congressional district seats, and the race for the Democratic ticket for Hillsborough State Attorney.
And we're also watching the race for several Hillsborough County School Board seats after some members faced backlash over a proposed property tax. As soon as we have results, they're going to appear at the bottom of your screen.
Got you covered there. And right now we have crews on standby for you, watching for the results in those races. We are also joined by political science professor J. Edwin Benton, here to break down what it all means, and we'll check in with the whole crew momentarily.
And as we watch those races, this is video from polling sites all across the Bay Area today. While polls are now closed in our area and most of the state, there's still about an hour left in the Panhandle here. We're seeing a bit of a shift in the number of registered voters here in the state of Florida. Courtney's taking a closer look at that turnout.
Tampa Bay wants to make sure that you know what you're seeing as we get into primary election night. All of our data will come from the Associated Press, local and state election officials. Vote by mail ballots, early votes, those are going to be the first things that we see come out of the gate. So let's take a closer look at the numbers. This data comes from the Florida Division of Elections, and you can see that for the August primary, 13,532,000 voters in this primary, 5.3 million Republicans, about a million more than the Democrats who are registered for this race, and 3.5 million registered as no party affiliation. Now, of those registered, 1.9 million voters came out and voted early in person. That's about 15%, and that includes both in-person early voting as well as vote by mail ballots. Taking a closer look, let's dive in on these numbers. 656,000 voted early in person. That's compared to 1.3 million who voted by mail. Now, those results are going to be the first up, followed by precincts as they upload their information this evening to the local Supervisor of Elections website for the unofficial results. Now, so far, election day voting, statewide seems about 21% for turnout. Polls, they're still open in the Panhandle.
A lot to get to here, and a big local race we're watching tonight is for Hillsborough County State Attorney. Former State Attorney Andrew Warren looking to get his old job back after the governor suspended him and then appointed Republican Susie Lopez. That was in 2022. But first, he is facing Elizabeth Martinez-Strauss for the Democratic nomination. And 10 Tampa Bay's Eric Glasser is live in Hillsborough County right now with what's at stake. Eric?
Oh, Dave, think about the dynamic here. If Andrew Warren comes away with a primary win tonight, he would be facing Susie Lopez, the current state attorney here in Hillsborough County, in the general election in November. But Susie Lopez only holds that job because she was appointed to it by Governor DeSantis, who is the one who suspended Andrew Warren. Now, Andrew Warren has said from the beginning that he believes that this is still his job. He's been twice elected to it, and that DeSantis overstepped his authority. Warren took the case to court, and a judge agreed, but said that he lacked the authority to reinstate Warren. An appeals court disagreed with that, but in the absence of the original judge reinstating Warren to this day, Warren is now running to get his job back. His opponent here, as you mentioned, trial attorney Elizabeth Martinez-Strauss, says she also disagrees with what Governor DeSantis did to Warren, but she says that she's the better candidate to face Lopez in November because if Warren wins, she questions whether DeSantis could simply suspend Warren again.
It's not going to go well. He's a risky candidate. And beyond that, I have different ideas of how to run the office than he did. I'm not saying he did a bad job, but sometimes, as a guy told me at one of the debates, a new broom sweeps clean. And sometimes a new face in an office is just what the community needs.
I mean, on one hand, we're continuing to fight in court because the principles involved are so much more important than just my position and who serves as state attorney. On the other hand, I want to continue serving this community. I want to make sure that this community has a state attorney who can keep us safe and reflects the values of this community, and that's why I'm running for re-election.
So strictly on a political note, I can tell you that some top Democrats were not happy with Martinez-Strauss challenging Andrew Warren in this primary. Warren was and is considered a rising star in the party, but Martinez-Strauss says she has grassroots support, members of law enforcement, folks living in Hillsborough County who all say that they are just tired of the political drama surrounding this office. As you mentioned, the polls closed just a short time ago. The returns are coming in. This is not a statewide race. In fact, it's not even the entire region. It is very centric to Hillsborough County. So we are expecting to get results in very quickly. We will be catching up with the candidates for their reaction and bring it to you when we get it. Reporting live in Tampa, Eric Lasser, 10 Tampa Bay.
Centric and drama-filled. Thank you, Eric. Also in Hillsborough County, several school board seats up for grabs. The recent fight over the proposed property tax playing a big role in this race. 10 Tampa Bay's Aaron Parsegian spoke with several school board members, and Aaron, they're hopeful they can keep their spots.
Yeah, those incumbents running for re-election understand that tax referendum is a tough ask, but ultimately voters will decide on that in November, which is what they wanted. When it comes to tonight, one of the things we're watching closely is this political dynamic playing out. Obviously, these are nonpartisan races, but that hasn't stopped partisans from injecting some influence on these races. Take a look. For the second straight election, Governor Ron DeSantis has endorsed a slate of school board candidates across the state aiming to get his education agenda in on the local level. On the other side, the state Democratic Party also endorsing candidates, and in some districts, like 2 here in Hillsborough County, they're facing off. In District 3, Dem-endorsed incumbent Jessica Vaughn is facing a challenge from DeSantis-endorsed Myosha Powell. And in District 1, a race that has seen a lot of money raised up until tonight, incumbent Nadia Combs is facing a challenge from 2 others, including DeSantis-endorsed Layla Collins. Now, each candidate says they won't let parties dictate their actions.
So I think the voters tonight and tomorrow will show that District 1 really, they don't care about politics, and they care about somebody who's going to represent them and also have the honesty and integrity.
This has been partisan for decades. The decisions you make on a school board should be nonpartisan. It should be about what is best for your community. Do you have the authority, and is that the law or not?
Now, this DeSantis versus Dems at the local level is an interesting part of races we will be watching throughout the night, as well as if that proposed referendum has an impact on any of the incumbents seeking re-election. Live in Hillsborough County, Aaron Parsegian, 10 Tampa Bay.
In Pinellas County, we're keeping an eye on the race for Supervisor of Elections. Julie Marcus is looking to stay in office, but Clearwater resident Chris Gleason is challenging her. In 10 Tampa Bay's Miranda Parnell joins us live right now. And Miranda, Gleason has repeated claims about the integrity of elections in Pinellas County.
That's right, Dave. Some of those claims even made it to a judge. Now, the judge did dismiss that case, ruling in favor of Marcus after Chris confronted and criticized her regarding her handling of how the office runs and records requests. And even as far as right now, he's live on his Twitter. It seems that he is inside an observer's room watching the ballots come in. Even right now, he is criticizing the way that this election has been run, claiming voter fraud, and criticizing the mail-in ballot system. Now, as far as Marcus, she has been holding this position since 2020. She stepped in to fill this role when the person who was in place retired. She then won the election in 2020 and has been operating the office ever since. Prior to that, she had a long history of working different elections in other capacities. As far as Chris Gleason, he says on his website that he is a self-proclaimed whistleblower. He says he's an Army veteran and a data expert. Now, we did reach out to both candidates. We're still waiting to hear back. But there was a woman out here who said that this is the most important race on the ballot. She said that she felt like a lot of people didn't realize that this was going to be decided today, and that they thought that they would have more time and be able to wait until November. She was saying this is what the race that represents the integrity of our elections, whether they are fair and balanced. And she said she felt like a lot of people just didn't realize that this would be decided today, but now it's too late, and we are watching the votes come in to see who will be the next supervisor of elections for Pinellas County. Back to y'all.
All right, Miranda, thank you. And we are starting to see precincts start to report across the state. Again, those early in-person votes as well as vote by mail getting uploaded, about 4% reporting. And you can see we're looking right here at the U.S. Senate Republican primary. Rick Scott hoping to not only win this and right now clear lead over the 2 opponents he faces, Keith Gross, a businessman from the Panhandle, John Columbus in the entertainment industry in Orlando. Both not a lot of name recognition, not a lot of financial backing. Rick Scott hoping to move on to the November election and then keep his seat in the U.S. Senate. He has already talked about his bid for Republican leadership in the Senate. Now let's see who he could potentially face when it comes to November. Debbie Mucarsel-Powell is a clear favorite in this race right now. Again, 12% reporting. We're looking at 70.5% of the votes right here, leading Brian Rush, a four-time state representative, 266,000 votes. And we're starting to see some of the local precincts reporting in our area for congressional seats. You can see Daniel Webster right here in the Republican primary for District 11. He has been in Congress since 2010 and a clear favorite here. I mean, easily besting John McCloy. McCloy running on an anti-abortion platform as well. Let's click through and see if we can see some others. Looking at Pasco County, Citrus County, Hernando County, District 12, the Republican primary here. Gus Bilirakis, again, clear lead in this race. And as I move through, we're seeing results really ticking off. And 710, this is about when we see this in primaries coming up. Robert Rockford, 46% of the vote in the Republican primary for District 14. That seat currently held by Congresswoman Kathy Castor. To see who she will face come November. We're still looking at that. Still not a lot of precincts uploading there. Too early to call that race. We'll take one last look right here as I kind of click around to see where precincts are reporting what districts we're seeing. This is the Panhandle. This is Matt Gaetz. We're watching this race, all eyes on this race. The Panhandle still open for voting this evening. And so that will close 8 o'clock our time, and we'll start to see those results roll in as well.
Yeah, it's going to take a little while, but when they start to come in, it'll be fast and furious. And University of South Florida political science professor Dr. J. Edwin Benton joins us right now.
Absolutely. We've had an extensive conversation about this gentleman in terms of Rick Scott on the ballot. Courtney segueing into this perfectly, right? Rick Scott on the ballot looking to keep his spot, but Democrat Debbie McCausell-Powell there looking to challenge him. How do you think that's going to break down as we move ahead?
Well, I think it's fair to say that Rick Scott probably will win going away to receive the renomination for his seat. The thing that I would encourage people to look at, whether this way or others, where the income is expected to win their primary, is how many votes are against that person within their own party. That could be trouble down the road. And so it's important to see how many votes are total against him from other opponents, whether it's Rick Scott or someone else. And then comes the question of the general election, where there will be vie against a challenger from the other. In this instance, by Democratic, what appears to be a strong Democratic challenger. So one thing, if I were Rick Scott, I'd be looking at, okay, so if I lose 10,000 votes, where would those 10,000 votes go in the general election? Will those Republicans not like me and they will sit home, or will they vote for the Democratic candidate? So just because an incumbent wins re-election doesn't mean there's not trouble down the road.
We see this week Democrats coalescing around a candidate at the Democratic National Convention. Do you sense there is division within the Republican Party right now?
Yes, I think there is. There's a division between the Donald Trump supporters and people more moderate, old timers, if you will, who would like to see a return to the old grand old party of its basic conservatism and not what I call the Trump style. So you have this faction of people, even a Nikki Haley who said a few weeks ago Donald Trump needs to stop whining and stay on target.
But at the same time, she said she's going to vote for Donald Trump. I mean, do you think they will cross that line and vote for Democrats?
Well, they're what I call the hardcore MAGA supporters of Donald Trump, that they're going to vote for him regardless. But there are other Republicans who are more moderate and don't like where the party has gone, the likes of Liz Cheney or Mitt Romney nationally, but people like that low in other parts of the country who can be pried away from voting for Donald Trump because they think either he's yesterday's news, he offers nothing to the future, or they're concerned about what they see as extreme far-right extremism, and they're concerned about the plight of American democracy. But there is a hardcore that come hell or high water, they will vote for him. But there are others who are more open-minded and say maybe that there's, just like the Democrats said among themselves a few weeks ago, it's a time for a change in terms of who our candidates should be. It should not be a Donald Trump, it should not be a Joe Biden. So the same thing could happen to Trump. And of course, Trump has what was maybe growing to be a problem with a controversial vice presidential nominee who has his own problems, which could potentially bring down the Republican ticket.
Now, when you say that, and hell or high water in terms of the devotion to a specific party and yesterday's news, as we move forward and people try to pick up the pieces where they stood and they're held accountable for the stances they took, what does that mean for a party?
That certainly can spell trouble in the case of some people still torn between DeSantis, even Trump, or how Trump treated DeSantis. So there are people who are still loyal to DeSantis and see him as a bright light for the future Republican Party. And they may be saying, is it time for us to pass the torch to a new generation, whether it's DeSantis or someone like him? And Trump is not that person any longer, whether it's 2024 or 2024 or 28 or 2032.
Yeah, where do you see the bench strength, though, in the Republican Party? Ron DeSantis did not do very well. Donald Trump really kind of pushed out a lot of his opponents in this race, but Ron DeSantis came up short. Nikki Haley was stronger than that. Do you see her as the potential heir apparent?
I think the thing that's going to hurt Nikki Haley, I think she had, let's say, Trump exit the race for whatever reason for the nomination. I think she had her own problems because once you criticize Trump or anyone, yet you're going to have to eat those words. And she's come back, just like DeSantis, almost like, let me back in your good graces again. And American voters, they're savvy enough to say, hey, you had some severe problems with that, but now you're on the bandwagon. What's wrong with you? Where's your integrity? Where are your standards? What are your expectations? So I think that's her problem. Will be down the road. Is that she's seen as okay. You stick to your guns, and she didn't. Even though I will support you, but with reservations. But she and DeSantis in the same boat. It's like they think that they're Republicans, not necessarily just Haley and DeSantis, who fear retribution down the. We see what Donald Trump is. He's pushed out a lot of Republicans. I mean, we still remember the little Marco remarks he made, and call him sacrificing DeSantis. I mean, ugly terms he's used, and those kinds. But for someone to come crawling back after that, American voters look and say, "Are you the person to take up the standard and lead the Republican Party in the future? If you have problems with him, you need to stand by that, and it is only so much you can use your Republican loyalty to support Trump or anyone else like that when you have gone on record of having some severe concerns about his leadership."
We want to pause just for a second here because we have a race to call. Let's go over to Courtney.
Yep, we can go ahead and call our first race of the evening. That is the Republican primary for Congressional District 11, which is held currently by Daniel Webster. He has been in that seat since 2010. Also, notably, he was the first Republican Speaker of the House for Florida, for the State House. Daniel Webster, moving on to the general election, will face Democrat Barbie Hardin-Hall, who is an uncontested Democrat. They will face off come the general election in November. And I want you to keep in mind that this evening, as we're calling these races, these are unofficial results. They will be certified on the 29th, and that's because there are still ballots out there, though unlikely to change many of these results. Your county canvassing board, they're going to review those to determine eligibility. Now, if you voted provisional or you were notified about a discrepancy with your vote by mail ballot, most likely you didn't sign the outside of the envelope, but you can fix that. You have until Thursday at 5 to get what's called a cure affidavit and also a copy of your photo ID back to your Supervisor of Elections office, a proper ID. They have all of this information on their websites. And you can also use the voter information tool to check your registration status to make sure that come November 5th, you are ready to go to vote in the general election, where we will see the presidential race at the top of that ticket. Deadline to register in the general election is October 7th.
All right, Courtney Robinson getting us together there. And as we mentioned, those numbers, a fluid situation, so we'll continue to bring those throughout the hour. Meantime, in Hillsborough County, several school board seats, as we mentioned, up for grabs. A nonpartisan race, but board members getting support from key party leaders out there. Aaron Parsegian monitoring the situation. Aaron, what do you know?
Yeah, Frank, it's an interesting dynamic at play. As you mentioned, these are nonpartisan races, but at the same time, in at least 2 districts here in Hillsborough County, you're seeing partisans weigh in and add some influence to maybe this election running up to it. So in these 2 districts, District 1, we have the incumbent Nadia Combs running against 2 others, and then she's facing Layla Collins, who is endorsed by Governor Ron DeSantis. Now, this is something he's done for a 2nd straight election, really endorse a slate of school board candidates across the state, and it's coming to a head here in Hillsborough County, where he's facing off against candidates that the Democratic Party in the state has endorsed. That's happening in District 1, as I mentioned, and District 3, where we have the incumbent Jessica Vaughn, the Hillsborough County School Board Vice Chair, facing a newcomer as well, who was endorsed by DeSantis. So as we're waiting for these unofficial results, we're going to be watching those races closely. The other thing we're keeping a close eye on is how this school referendum that voters will vote on in November may actually impact races for the incumbents. So there's 4 incumbents running tonight for re-election to keep their seat. At the same time, those 4 incumbents voted to send this referendum that would increase property taxes to voters in November. Now, how voters see that as a referendum on them could be interesting to watch as these unofficial results come in. It's already been a target for some of the candidates seeking a seat on that board, and we'll be following all of those dynamics closely through the night. In Hillsborough County, Aaron Parsegian, 10 Tampa Bay.
And we've been watching that referendum, the push for a referendum from the Hillsborough School Board here, trying to get it on the ballot, and then the county commission pushing back and went to courts, going back and forth, and eventually, it's going to end up on the November ballot now.
Right. Wanted to get to that, but momentarily we'll talk about it because Courtney Robinson has some more numbers for us. Courtney, what are you finding?
That's right. The Associated Press predicting going ahead and calling the Republican primary for District 12 for Gus Bilirakis, the incumbent who has been in the House for since 2013, besting his opponent, Hank Dunlap. Bilirakis represents Citrus County, Hernando County, Pasco County. You can see Pasco County, we're still waiting for votes to roll in here. But again, the Associated Press saying that there are enough votes to call this race for Bilirakis. He will move on to face environmentalist Democrat Roch Abujade Jr. in the November election. So we have Bilirakis here called in the Republican primary for District 12. District 11 also called for incumbent Daniel Webster in the Republican primary. And checking in on Senate here, Republican primary for Senate, incumbent Rick Scott hoping to move on to the general election, planning to do that, and then will face the Democrat who wins this primary, Debbie Mucarsel-Powell, leading handedly in this race. Brian Rush coming in 450,000 votes behind Stanley Campbell, a distant second. So we're going to keep watching this. We're going to keep watching all of these races, and as these are called, we'll go ahead and bring you those results.
So the Bilirakis empire continues. Mike Bilirakis served in Congress for a long time around here, and now his son Gus certainly is involved in politics as well. We're keeping an eye. We talked a little bit about this Hillsborough tax referendum, the schools referendum right here. It would raise property taxes in order to increase teacher pay, help pay for the schools. It's something the superintendent of schools in Hillsborough County feels very, very strongly about.
Absolutely, and you want to get folks' attention, you talk about their pocketbook, right, in terms of what's going to happen with that situation. A conversation we've been having for some time now as we continue the coverage over this referendum.
All right, let's take a look at what that means.
Let's let our voters go in and decide, and I will have one vote just like them.
A battle between Hillsborough County School Board and the County Commission has teachers and your tax dollars caught in the middle. And it's all going to come down to your vote in November. The district is proposing a property tax increase that would be used to increase teacher salaries.
I'm hoping that, even though it's a burden on our homeowners, it's a little bit, if it means that it can keep our teachers and keep our schools in the way that they deserve to be, then it's worth it for me.
I can make more money outside of teaching. I enjoy the job, I enjoy the hours, I enjoy the students. However, it doesn't pay the bills.
If passed, it will cost you an extra $1 for every $1,000 a home is worth. According to the property appraiser's office, the cost to a typical homeowner in Hillsborough County would be $281 a year. The district states it will raise close to $200 million a year and add $6,000 to each teacher and administrator's salary.
I think they should do that if they want their kids taught. You have to pay teachers to do stuff like that.
But over the last few months, a legal battle ensued over when to put the proposal on the ballot.
In 2 years, I am hopeful the economic climate will be much improved. There'll be only one tax on the ballot, and the school district will be in a much better position to ask for a new tax.
Some county commissioners were concerned it would be too much to ask voters to decide on the property tax increase and the community investment tax at the same time. So, the majority of the commission voted to push the school district's proposal until 2026. But the superintendent says they need the money now.
Our stance, they have no right to postpone that at all. They are superseding, they're trying to take away the power of the school board.
Make no mistake, the students of our district, the young people of our district lost today. They cannot wait 2 years to have a quality teacher in front of them. They cannot wait 2 years to have their vast needs met.
Even Governor Ron DeSantis weighed in on the issue.
Demanding tax increases is absolutely not the way to go. I think taxpayers are sick of it.
The school district brought the issue before a judge, who then allowed it to be on the ballot this year.
I do not believe that a judge can order duly elected officials and violate their First Amendment right and dictate whether or not they should vote up or down on an item.
The judge appealed, and again, a judge favored putting it on the ballot. So come November, you will have the final say.
Been such a back and forth on that particular race. Yeah, it's a little bit of whiplash for all the voters out there, but now it's going to be on the ballot, so we do know that at this point. Let's take a look at right now some of the congressional races. 30 contested congressional races in the state of Florida on the ballot. This is U.S. Representative Florida District 9 right here. Taking a look at this right here, Thomas Shalafo, this is the Republican field here, retired colonel. He is in the lead right now, and presumably, if this continues, will face Darren Soto, the Democratic incumbent.
Also want to break down Florida District 18, Democratic Party, the primary for that, and Peter Bronston facing off against Andrea Kahl there, bringing up the numbers, and it looks like Andrea Kahl has 67% of the vote. Again, we are still counting some of those votes that are coming in. We mentioned it is a fluid situation. We'll keep you up to speed with that. But want to extend the conversation that we've had here with Dr. Benton regarding some of the matters on the ballot day.
Yeah, one of the things I want to just talk about is turnout in a primary like this. Historically, it's very, very low. Who shows up at the polls for a primary like this?
It's usually die-hard or strong base support with the Democrat-Republican Party. But if the voters get turned off because they feel like the candidates are not listening to them, their economics and so forth, it could spell doom down the road. But right now, there is jury is still out, so to speak, is what the feelings are of the voters in that regard.
Yeah. I mean, if you hear from both parties, I mean, you hear at times the Republican Party is not as energized as it might have been back in 2016. The Democratic Party is energized, but that's coming off this new candidate at the top of the ticket entering the race, and some excitement around that.
Right. There is. I think there's new leadership in the Democratic Party with former Agricultural Commissioner Nikki Fried taken to helm about a year ago, and she's energized the party. And I think that has got the Democrat and also with Kamala Harris as becoming the presidential candidate, it's excited voters, but some of the issues that have been championed by Harris, such as gay and lesbian rights, abortion, women in particular, those kinds of things it's going to energize that segment of the typical Democratic base. And if it's a fairly high or higher than usual turnout in the primary, that will probably be indicative these people they'll show up to vote for their party in the general election. And it could even spill over from Republicans who are disenchanted with the Republican Party who have concerns about some of the issues, which particularly the economy, which is not being addressed presently and consistently by the Trump candidacy.
Now, Dr. Benton, we were talking about some of the races that were nonpartisan, right? But it always goes back to some polarizing beginning in terms of whether it's Democrat or Republican. We had Aaron Parsegian on a race there talking about who was endorsed by whom.
Oh, exactly. because, I mean, whether it's fair or not, or accurate or not, people do pay attention to who endorses whom, because if you, let's say if Barack Obama endorses someone and you were supportive of Obama, you're more inclined to listen to him than sometimes your own instincts, or certainly the appeal of candidates from the other party.
And certainly there's money that also often follows that kind of endorsement from the national level, often funnels down to the local level.
Right.
Do you believe the state of Florida, in the state of Florida, there are 1 million more registered Republicans in the state of Florida, but yet the Democrats believe this could be in play, the state of Florida right now? Ron DeSantis has said Florida is a conservative state and has talked about that. Do you think Florida is in play for the Democrats this time around?
Very much so, because the number of registered voters can be misleading. We're assuming that if in this instance the Republican Party has 1 million more, which they do, registered voters, the big question is, will they show up when the big dance on November the 5th or not, or will they sit home because they're disenchanted with the head of the ticket or some other candidates in the line? So just because they have more potential voters or based upon their registration. But in Florida, there are many people who do what people used to do historically, not only in Florida, but in the South at one time, where the Democratic Party was the major party. You will designate yourself now as Republican because you know a lot of the races you want to vote for there, and so you will register there, but it doesn't necessarily mean you won't vote Democratic on November the 5th. And the other, what I call the wild card in this, about 3.5 million people who don't identify with any party, and we would call those people independents. And the election data going back, I mean, almost the 1950s show us that the candidate who wins the presidency is the one who wins the lion's share of the independent vote.
Yeah, and looking at the primary here, you do not see the independent vote because in the partisan races,
exactly,
the independents don't vote.
That's right. They sit it out. They can't vote. So they're a potential reservoir of votes for any of the other parties, depending on their own views, and not to mention even what I call weak Democrats, weak Republicans who may cross over. The same people who were responsible for the election of George W. Bush in 2000, 2004, in 2008 and 2012, not only nationwide in Florida, they had to vote for Barack Obama. He would not be elected. So the American voter is not necessarily wedded to political parties as people are in Great Britain, in Germany, and France. We hold our party affiliations very loosely and not like it's a matter of life and death.
Absolutely. Right. Well, Dr. Benton, we're going to have you expound a little bit more as we have this conversation go throughout the rest of this half hour.
That's right. It is just about 7:33 right now. If you're just joining us, this is 10 Tampa Bay. We are bringing you live team coverage of the Florida primary. We're just getting results in, and sometimes it's a little slow, but once they begin to come in, the results are fast and furious. We'll bring those to you.
I'm Frank Wiley here alongside Dave Wagner. Courtney Robinson also joining us tonight to break down all of those numbers.
That's right. You know, polls are closed for the most part in this state. Another half hour in the Panhandle. All the Tampa Bay area polls are closed. Yeah, but again, we're checking the Panhandle. Another 30 minutes or so, we should begin getting some results.
Yeah, got you covered. Once that happens, of course, we will get a better look at results of the only statewide race on the ballot today, the race for U.S. Senate. On the Republican side, Rick Scott working to keep his seat.
And on the Democratic side, Debbie McCarsell-Powell is expected to lead the pack in that race. 10 Tampa Bay's Courtney Robertson has a look at that race and the results of some congressional seats as well in Florida.
And I'm going to go ahead and start with the Democratic primary for District 13. That is the seat currently held by Republican Anna Paulina Luna. We can go ahead and call this race for Whitney Fox. Whitney Fox, a mom of two, she left the Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority to run in this race. Many of these candidates, actually all of these candidates, say they are here because they do want to unseat Anna Paulina Luna come November. Anna Paulina Luna just elected 2 years ago and has already made a big name for herself in the Republican Party. Checking in on Congressional District 11, we have called that race for Daniel Webster. Webster, the incumbent here, besting his opponent, John McCloy. He'll move on to face Barbie Hardin-Hall, the Democrat, come November. And looking at District 12 as well, incumbent Republican Representative Gus Bilirakis, again, easily, handedly winning this race. He will face environmentalist Roch Aboudaje when it comes to the November election. Now let's take a look at Senate. In these races, the Associated Press does not like to call these races until we see the polls close in the Panhandle, but just take a look at this right now. We have more than a million votes in. Rick Scott, the clear leader in this race. He will move on to the November election. And if we check in on that, you can see favored in this, Debbie Mucarsel Powell, the Navy veteran who's also served in Washington, no stranger to Washington, winning a seat in 2018 for the U.S. House. Again, not called yet, but you can see so many precincts reporting, 38% reporting right now. We're going to keep an eye on both of these. These are the big races that we're watching statewide as well. Checking in on the state attorney for the 13th district. This is another closely watched race, the Democratic primary for the 13th, and Andrew Warren looking to win back his seat. He was elected twice, then removed by Governor Ron DeSantis. He faces Elizabeth Martinez-Strauss, and you can see she's just about 22,000 votes behind Warren. The winner of this race will move on to face Suzy Lopez in the November election.
We are hearing from the Hillsborough County Supervisor of Elections. We are told they are having some technical issues right now. They are not specific about what those are, but we'll continue to look into that and how that might affect the vote counting going on there. Right now, we're going to go to Pinellas County. Miranda Parnell is keeping an eye on the Supervisor of Elections race.
That's right, Dave. I know that just like you mentioned, the website is having some issues. I think I got the lucky refresh on the Vote Pinellas website. Now, from what I'm seeing as the unofficial results right now, 95 precincts reporting. Chris Gleason has 23,000 around that neighborhood, and Julie Marcus has 126,000 in that neighborhood. So right now, incumbent Julie Marcus looking to be ahead of the game right now as the results roll in. Now, I will say Chris Gleason seemed to be in an observer's room. Normally, we don't see this type of watch party. Normally, it's kind of everyone around. This was watching in the observer's room as the ballots roll in. He has been critical of how Marcus runs the office so far as to take it in front of a judge. Now, the judge did dismiss his claims and rule in favor of Marcus, who has been running this position since 2020. Now, she stepped into this role when the person that was in place retired, won the election, and has been in charge of the office ever since. As far as Gleason, he says he is a data expert and an Army veteran, and he is also a self-proclaimed whistleblower. And we spoke to some folks out here today who say they believe that the reason this race may not have gotten as much hype as others is people may have thought that this decision would come in November, but she says, hey, it's all decided today who will be the next person for the Pinellas County Supervisor of Elections.
All right, Miranda, I know busy times out there for you and the crew as well. Got to ask, have you heard from either of the candidates yet?
Frank, you know, we tried to get a head start on this, reaching out to them in the days prior to the election. And Julie Marcus said that she wouldn't be able to talk with us because she was busy working on running the election. As far as Chris Gleason, we have reached out, sending an email and also DMing him, still waiting to hear back. But like I said, he has a kind of a live watch on his Twitter feed and has been posting throughout the day.
All right. Well, we are also keeping an eye on the Hillsborough School Board races right now. They're supposed to be nonpartisan, but in fact, they've gotten partisan support from various folks. The governor has weighed in on his ideas for the best candidates there. Moms for Liberty have weighed in on candidates in some places as well. But obviously the Democratic Party has weighed in as well. But let's check in right now, if we can, with Aaron Perisic. He's keeping an eye on these races for us and the influence on this race because there's going to be a referendum on the ballot this November. Aaron.
Yeah, and that's one of the things going to be interesting at play here tonight, Dave. There's 4 incumbents running to keep their seat on the Hillsborough County School Board. All 4 of those voted to send that referendum that would raise property taxes to voters in November. That was obviously the center of a legal battle that's gone on for weeks now, but it will go to voters in November. Ultimately, they understand and have told me that they know it's a tough ask, but It will be up to voters, and that's what they wanted. Of course, that's one of the things voters might be keeping in mind as they hit the polls earlier today and even as they early voted heading into today. But you mentioned that other dynamic playing a role as well. These are nonpartisan races, but that hasn't stopped from partisans putting on some influence. For the second straight election in a row, Governor Ron DeSantis has sent out a slate of school board candidates that he approves of. And this year, the Florida Democratic Party put out a slate of candidates they approve of. And they're going head to head in several districts across the state, including 2 here in Hillsborough County, District 1, where incumbent Nadia Combs is facing a challenge from 2 people, including Layla Collins, the DeSantis-endorsed candidate who's married to State Senator Jay Collins, a Republican as well. And that's also happening in District 3, where Jessica Vaughn, the board vice chair right now, the incumbent, is facing a challenge from Myosha Powell, a newcomer. One of the things that we've also been interested in talking about is that referendum, where these folks stand on it. As I said, they're really interested in leaving that up to the voters in November, but these folks that are running against these incumbents say this is one of the reasons they are doing so, because this is something that should have been figured out in the budget without going after an additional tax this November, something the governor, as we mentioned earlier in the broadcast, has spoke about at length as well. So it's going to be interesting as we wait for these unofficial results to come in to see how these things are playing an impact moving forward.
All right, Aaron, thank you. We're going to go ahead and call the race for District 15, the Republican primary, a really interesting race here sparked by former President Donald Trump. Laurel Lee will move on to the November general election. Laurel Lee keeping her seat so far as we move forward this evening. Besting James Judge, 13,000 votes. She leads him. Again, Associated Press going ahead and calling this for Lee. She will move on to face Patricia Kemp when it comes to the November general election. Laurel Lee, as I talked about with former President Trump, after she gave her support to Governor DeSantis in the presidential preference primary, that is when former President Donald Trump said, I'm calling all Republicans to face Lee in this primary. Lee, again, maintaining that 73% of the vote so far, and she will move on to face Pat Kemp when it comes to the November general. Pat is well known in Hillsborough County, serving on county commission since 2016. So we will see how that race shapes up come November. I do want to run through some other races right here. We're looking at District 14, most of Tampa right here. Kathy Castor holds this seat in the U.S. House for District 14. Robert Rockford leading that race right now. Moving on to District 15, when we look at this, Laurel Lee, again, we talked about that one. I want to talk about Vern Buchanan here in Sarasota, 63% of the vote, leading Eddie Spear. Eddie Spear, known in that area for a nonprofit that he has with a Christian school, but also he was selected by DeSantis to be on the board for the new College of Florida, but the Florida Senate did not confirm that board seat for him. And let's see, as we move on to District 16, another one that we are watching right here. Again, too early to call many of these races, but we are watching these. Looking at the Panhandle, again, this is one that we'll be watching with Matt Gaetz as we talk about the Republican Party and his feud with former Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. Millions of dollars spent in this race to unseat Matt Gaetz in the Republican primary. We'll see how this one shapes up when polls close. Again, 7:45 right now, so about 15 minutes in the Panhandle. And again, looking at the Senate Republican primary, Rick Scott leading his 2 opponents, Keith Gross, John Columbus, both little name recognition, not a lot of financial backing. And as we look, who will he face come November? Debbie McCarcel-Powell, the favored in this race, and again, proving that to be true with 69.8%. And let's check in on the state attorney's race as we start to see results come in from Hillsborough County. Right now in the Democratic primary, state attorney Andrew Warren hoping to win his job back. 70% of the vote right here, 38,000 votes, leading his opponent, Elizabeth Martinez-Strauss, 22,000 votes. And the winner of this will go on to face Susie Lopez in November. Lopez appointed by Governor Ron DeSantis 2 years ago after he removed Warren from that seat. Warren had been twice elected to that position. So this number of ramifications as we watch this race to see how things will shape up. And again, looking at Senate, this is one of the biggest races that we're watching, especially when it comes to the Democratic primary. Last look right here. Let's take a look at District 16. Still too early to call that one. Sorry, guys. All right. And then again, big race right now, District 15, as former President Trump had called on Republicans to go ahead and run against Lee, try to unseat her for her backing DeSantis in the presidential preference primary. She will face Pat Kemp when it comes to November. Dave.
All right. Fantastic work there, Courtney. And we know when we're dealing with the panhandle, we're dealing with a different time zone as we wait for those results.
Yeah, we have another 15 minutes or so until the polls close up in the panhandle.
Absolutely. And Dr. Benton, I want to talk with you about this because people say school board, how is that applicable to me in my daily life? And what does that really entail, right? That has a lot to do with the cell phone policies and, of course, the books that are allowed in the classroom.
Oh, yes, that's just part of it. Because a few years ago, the school board in Hillsborough County got into a very controversial issue about dress codes as well. But the public here in Hillsborough County, and being a resident of Hillsborough County, I'm probably closer to it than the average person, that people were upset. I know when my children were going through the public school some years ago about the curriculum, what was appropriate, what was not appropriate. Other concerns was that under previous school superintendents, there was a lot of fat and waste in the budget, and people today are saying, yes, teachers need to be paid more, but we have too many administrators and not enough teachers in the classroom. That's where the rubber meets the road. We need more. So if we were to, so they said the school district should get their own house in order, trim the size of an a large amount of administrators and then rechannel that money into hiring more teachers. So Hillsborough County has been the school. Obviously, the membership has changed over the years, but the board over the years has taken their licks from the public, thinking that the school board has not been a wise steward of spending the public's money in the right way, and so that could backfire if let's say let's say one big if we know that the item is going to be on the ballot, that both of them are going to be on the ballot in November. If they lose the issue of extra money for teachers, it may be a decade before they can safely bring it back to the voters again if they're that ticked off. So if they win, that's a big coup, they pull it off. If they don't, it could be a major step backwards, and the public still will be clamoring for the fact that the school district is not spending the money wisely and put it in the right places. After all, to teach a child, you don't necessarily need administrators. You need a smaller teacher per student ratio,
sure,
so to get more attention. And so the public, and being a member of the public with school-age children some years ago, I was very concerned about the school district not being wise in spending its money.
Why are we seeing some of these groups, like Moms for Liberty, a conservative group, involved in school board politics?
Well, I think it goes back to like teaching morals in schools and what students should be reading, what the curriculum and the books and so forth. So these groups are inserting sometimes very, very private kinds of concerns, their own philosophy, religious beliefs, and so forth. So that they think the schools have gone too far. They've gone way far out of bounds.
And Dr. Benton, you go far beyond the ballot. You get into the granular portion of what's going on with each candidate and the outlook, and you look back over time that, you've been covering these types of matters. As much as things change, have you seen a lot of change ultimately with what happens after the votes are cast? Is it the same issues that continue to pop up?
Oh yeah, same issues. And if they aren't addressed successfully, the voters don't forget when the next election rolls around. That's what sometimes you see, like a revolving circle of people coming on and off the board because people, let's try this person, and they don't seem to get the message that you're not looking at the right thing, so it's time to let's move on to someone else. And I think with DeSantis weighing in, that it's going to be interesting. I think two of you mentioned earlier some of the candidates that are incumbents that are facing opposition, on ones that voted for putting this back on the ballot. And some of them might argue, I don't know, could argue that I don't necessarily support the tax itself, but I believe that the voters should have the right to make that choice in the election. And whether or not I would vote for the tax increase, it would pass, will be another issue. But with DeSantis weighing in and saying there was money appropriated by the legislature this year to address that issue, it makes the school board look like it's, there's money available, but you're going over the top here.
Yeah, we want to interrupt you for a minute because we have a race to call right now. The Pinellas Supervisor of Elections. Let's go to Miranda Parnell. She's at that site right now. Miranda?
That's right, Dave. We're getting in right now that this has been called with 100 of the precincts reporting these unofficial results for 84% of the votes going to Julie Marcus. So she will be remaining in her position once these are certified as the Supervisor of Elections for Pinellas County. Now, she was running against Chris Gleason, that Clearwater resident who has been critical of how Marcus runs the office for quite some time now. Like I said earlier, even taking it in front of a judge, his critiques of her and how she runs the office, as well as public records requests. Now, that judge did dismiss that complaint, ruling in favor of Marcus, who took over this role in 2020 when the person in that position retired. She won that election. That is what Gleason was critical of, how she handled that election, throwing his name in the ring for this one, but did not take it away tonight based on these unofficial results. Now, I doubt that this is going to be the last that we will hear of Gleason, because even as when the votes were coming in, as those ballots were being counted, we could see Gleason was in the observer's room watching as the votes came in, being critical of how this election was being handled. So I'm sure we will be hearing from him more in the coming days. But as for tonight, those unofficial results speak for themselves.
Margin there.
Miranda in the dark and out of the dark all at the same time.
She's working longer than the lights, right?
Yeah. All right, well, we're keeping an eye also on what's coming up this November. Obviously, we've got a presidential race for this country right now. A pretty polarized country, as we speak.
Yeah, a polarized country. And as we just spoke with our guest here, learning that among some of the parties, a lot of polarization as well. But we know it goes primary day, November, then beyond that.
That's right. And here in the state of Florida, as we mentioned, there are about 1 million more registered Republican voters. The key in every election is, how do you mobilize your voters for each party? How do you get them to the polls? What will drive them to the polls? Here in the state of Florida, we've got marijuana on the ballot. We also have abortion rights on the ballot. There's a fair amount at stake that may drive people to the polls on both sides.
Yeah. Top to bottom, right? That includes everything on down to the school board elections. And we also talk about flipping seats, so it's all inclusive.
Right. They talk about the presidential coattails. How will that help in this election? Let's take a look at what's at stake coming up this November.
Proudly accept your nomination for President of the United States.
I am running to become President of the United States of America.
Come November, all eyes will be on the race for the White House. And we've already witnessed several history-making moments that not only changed the minds of some voters, it also changed who will appear on the ballot.
In recent weeks, it's become clear to me that I need to unite my party in this critical endeavor. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation.
In July, President Joe Biden announced he was dropping out of the race. The announcement came as he battled COVID and after weeks of mounting pressure following his disastrous debate performance.
Continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence.
Now, Vice President Kamala Harris looks to fill his seat.
We have earned the support of enough delegates to secure the Democratic nomination.
As we speak, the Democratic National Convention is underway in Chicago. Harris will formally accept the nomination later this week, and tomorrow her running mate, Tim Walz, will take the podium.
But it was my students. They encouraged me to run for office. They saw in me what I was hoping to instill in them, a commitment of common good.
On the Republican side, former President Donald Trump accepted the party's nomination just days after an assassination attempt.
Take a look at what happened. No matter what obstacle comes our way, we will not break, we will not bend, We will not back down, and I will never stop fighting for you, your family, and our magnificent country.
Trump has continued on the campaign trail amid multiple legal battles and court appearances, vowing to win back the White House. J.D. Vance, a former Trump critic, is now his running mate.
Now, I pledge to every American, no matter your party, I will give you everything I have to serve you and to make this country a place where every dream you have for yourself, your family, and your country will be possible once again.
Trump and Harris are expected to meet on the debate stage for the first time next month. So there are just 77 days until the November election, and we take a look kind of at the ebb and flow of elections. Right now, we've got the Democratic National Convention taking place in Chicago. They have the momentum this week, but I tell you, it can change day to day, week to week, sometimes hour to hour.
Yeah. 1 week is completely different versus the previous week. I want to bring it a little closer to home because Aaron Parsegian has some results with the Hillsborough school board race there. Aaron, what are you finding out?
Yeah, we're starting to see some of these unofficial results come in, Frank and Dave. These are not 100% of the precincts reporting, but we can show you what's shaping up right now. I first want to pull up the District 1 race for the school board here. We've been talking about it a lot. This features the incumbent Nadia Collins, who was endorsed by the Florida Democratic Party, going up against two challengers, including Layla Collins, who's married to State Senator Jay Collins, a Republican, and has been endorsed by Governor Ron DeSantis. You can see with these precincts reporting, Nadia Combs holding a lead 53% to 37%, Julie McGill at 10%. And if we move over to the other race we've been watching closely, where we've seen kind of political parties weighing in leading up to this, is going to be in District 3, where Jessica Vaughn, the vice chair of the school board in Hillsborough right now, holding that lead over Myosha Powell, who was endorsed by Governor Ron DeSantis. And then moving forward to District 5 now as well, you can see the incumbent Henry Washington, also known as Shake Washington, holding a lead there as well. So right now for the precincts that we are getting results in for, it looks like it's a good night so far for the incumbents in this race, despite some of them going up against endorsements from the governor, and as well facing questions about that school tax referendum that would raise property taxes, one they say would support the schools and help meet some of the problems they've had with teacher vacancies and things like that, leaving that up to voters in November. But of course, all of those dynamics playing a role in tonight as we see these unofficial results. But right now, for the results that we are getting in, looking good for three of the incumbents at the moment.
That's exactly right. Let's stay in Hillsborough County. So big races right here. Republicans showing up in their primary contest and saying that they want to keep the representatives who they have in Washington. They're going to keep them there. We're looking at District 16, parts of Hillsborough, and of course parts of Manatee as well. Vern Buchanan been in that position since 2013, 63% of the vote. That race has been called. Now, as to who he will face when it comes to the November general election, we're still waiting for this race to be called. It is very, very tight. Look at that, just about 1,300 votes separating Democrat Trent Miller as well as Jan Schneider. Watching that one. Looking at District 14 as well, another one that has not yet been called when it comes to the House. But again, much of Tampa Bay. Rocky Rockford right there, 52% of the vote. Whoever wins the Republican primary for District 14 will go on to face Representative Kathy Castor when it comes to November. Checking in on District 13 right here, another big race that we're watching. It's already been called for Democrat Whitney Fox. Fox will move on to face Anna Paulina Luna, a controversial representative in Washington, made quite a name for herself in the Republican Party in just the 2 years that she has been in Washington. And District 11 as well, also called for Webster, who has been in that seat since 2010. He will face Barbie Hardin Hall when it comes to the November general election. District 12, also called Gus Bilirakis right there, almost 85% of the vote. He will face environmentalist Rock Abudaje Jr. in the November general election. And another big race we've got our eyes on still has not been called. State Attorney for the 13th District. We're keeping this one. We'll let you know when this finally is called.
As we continue to bring you live coverage of the Florida primary on our 10 Tampa Bay Plus app and on YouTube as well, in just about a minute or so, we're going to be cutting into programming on 10 Tampa Bay to bring you updates and to our TV audience here, and then we'll rejoin you on the stream right here. So just stand by for just a moment. And this is 10 Tampa Bay. We are breaking in to give you an update on tonight's Florida primary results. I'm Dave Wagner. One of the races we're watching right now is for U.S. Senate, is the only statewide race on the ballot today. That seat currently held by former Florida Governor Rick Scott. Take a look at the results here so far. Here's a look at that race. The Democratic primary, Debbie McCarsell-Powell has been projected the winner on the Democratic side. You see Rick Scott right here, and those are the results we're seeing here. Now, one of the more crowded races is the Florida District 13 Democratic primary, which is most Pinellas County. These are the candidates looking to challenge Republican Anna Paulina Luna. The race has been called right now for Democrat Whitney Fox. And just south of there, in the race to represent District 16, which is in Manatee and southern Hillsborough counties, the incumbent is Vern Buchanan, already declared a winner. Here is a look at those results. We'll be back at 9 o'clock with another update. I'm Dave Wagner, 10 Tampa Bay. And welcome back to our coverage here on 10 Tampa Bay. We are following tonight's primary and trying to get the results just as quickly as possible to some of you. We do have the results in the Senate primary races.
That's correct. We have Senator Rick Scott winning the Republican primary. He will face Democrat Debbie McCarsell-Powell in the November general election. Again, we were looking at these numbers, but we did not call them until the Panhandle closed their polls. That is, practiced by the Associated Press. So
and that's because it's a statewide race versus a race in this time zone, so that's why we didn't do it.
No doubt. A busy night, of course, and this is something of an appetizer, if you will.
Yes.
Yeah, it's only just begun.
This one went really quick. I don't know that November goes this quick.
No, well, we got 77 days, so it'll be a race to the finish for all these folks. A lot of money pouring in. Some people believe the state of Florida is in play for the Democrats. We'll see if that's actually true. We'll know because you'll start seeing campaign ads on our air. We'll keep you posted. You'll keep us posted because you'll see them. Thanks for being with us. And we appreciate you watching 10 Tampa Bay for our live coverage.